Billionaire in disguise orders a burger. Black waiter hands him a shocking bill. Table 15 isn't paying. Just look at his face, whispered manager Kevin to the hostess, loud enough for the man in the cap and plain shirt to hear from the entrance of Golden Burger, Atlanta's most famous hamburger joint. Alex Thompson, 42, never imagined he would be treated as a suspect in the very empire he had built. Dressed in construction worker's clothes, with uncombed hair and stubble, he was unrecognizable as the billionaire owner of the restaurant chain that made $200 million a year. Hostess Melissa looked at him with that fake smile she reserved for problematic customers. "How many people?" she asked curtly, already directing him to the most hidden table in the establishment, the one against the bathroom wall, where the sound of flushing toilets competed with conversation. Alex had arrived there after an anonymous tip on the corporate website. Someone reported systematic racial discrimination at Golden Burger on Peachtree Street, his flagship restaurant. As CEO, he could have sent in auditors, investigators, or simply fired everyone. But something in the desperate tone of that message made her want to see for herself. "One person," she replied with an accent she had practiced for days, imitating workers she had known since childhood in the suburb where she grew up before fortune came her way. As he walked to the rejected table, Alex watched how other customers were treated. A well-dressed white couple was greeted by Kevin himself, who personally escorted them to the premium area overlooking the street. A Hispanic family waited 15 minutes on their feet before anyone deigned to serve them, being directed to a table near the kitchen, where the noise was deafening. Kevin turned his attention to Alex with obvious irritation. "The waiter will be with you shortly," he lied blatantly, as Alex could see all the employees deliberately avoiding his section. It was then that Jerome Washington, a 23-year-old black man, approached the table with a genuine smile that contrasted with the hostile environment. There was something different about him, a dignity that no uniform could mask, an intelligence shining in his eyes that did not go unnoticed. "Good afternoon, sir." "Sorry for the delay," Jerome said politely, although Alex knew it wasn't his fault. "What can I get you?" Alex ordered a classic hamburger and fries, discreetly observing how Jerome was treated by his colleagues. Mean jokes, accidental shoves, orders shouted as if he were deaf. The young man absorbed it all with a patience that revealed years of experience dealing with this kind of humiliation. When Jerome brought the order 25 minutes later, much longer than it took for the other tables, her hands were shaking slightly. Not from nervousness, but from something deeper. Restrained anger, perhaps. Or fear. "Here's his order, sir," Jerome said, placing the plate on the table along with napkins. It was then that Alex noticed. There was something hidden under the napkins. A small piece of paper, discreetly folded. Jerome quickly walked away, but not before whispering almost imperceptibly, "Read it when you're alone." Alex waited a few minutes, pretending to eat while watching the restaurant's activity. When he was sure no one was paying attention, he carefully unfolded the paper. The handwritten words made his blood run cold. "They don't know who you are. But he does. And he needs her help before it's too late." At that moment, Alex realized he had stumbled upon something much bigger and more sinister than simple discrimination. Jerome knew her true identity, but how? And what exactly was going on in his own restaurant that an employee would risk passing a secret note to an unknown customer? If you're enjoying this story of revenge and justice, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out what was really going on behind the scenes of that billion-dollar empire and how a simple hamburger would become the catalyst for the biggest turnaround in Alex Thompson's life. Alex reread the note 3 times, feeling a mixture of shock and curiosity. How had Jerome discovered his identity? And more importantly, what exactly was going on that required urgent help? He pretended to finish his hamburger while watching Jerome being systematically humiliated by his colleagues. Kevin seemed to take special pleasure in making the young man's life hell. He shouted unnecessary orders, made him redo perfect tasks, and blamed him for problems that were clearly not his fault. "Jerome!" Kevin yelled from the kitchen. "You forgot to clean his table 16. It was a blatant lie. Alex had seen Jerome cleaning that table minutes before. The young man ran back to clean it again, without arguing, without complaining. But Alex noticed something in his eyes. It wasn't submission. It was strategy. Jerome was putting up with everything for some specific reason. Alex decided to stay until the end of the shift. At 10 o'clock at night, when the restaurant closed, he waited in the dark parking lot. Jerome came out the back door, clearly exhausted, but when he saw Alex leaning against a borrowed pickup truck, his eyes lit up with a mixture of relief and urgency. I thought you weren't going to show up, Jerome said, looking nervously around. How do you know who his name is? Alex got straight to the point. Jerome smiled for the first time since they met. My sister Keisha works in the finance department of her parent company. She showed me your picture in a corporate magazine 2 years ago. When you showed up here in disguise, I knew right away. Alex felt a pang of admiration. The kid was smarter than he thought. What do you need to tell me? Not here, Jerome looked around again. Kevin has cameras in the parking lot and records everything. Can we go somewhere else? During their conversation on the abandoned overpass near the restaurant, Jerome revealed a conspiracy that made Alex's blood boil. Kevin wasn't just discriminating against black employees. He was systematically stealing from the restaurant and using discrimination as a smokescreen. He alters the sales records after you leave, explained Jerome, showing photos on her cell phone. She takes money from the cash register and blames black employees for non-existent mistakes. She's already managed to fire 4 people this way, always finding an excuse not to pay severance. Alex saw the evidence, screenshots showing changes to the system after hours, photos of Kevin tampering with the safe when he thought he was alone, audio recordings of his bad-mouthing black employees to prejudiced customers. Why didn't you take this to corporate HR? Alex asked. Jerome laughed bitterly. Do you think anyone would believe the word of a black waiter against a white manager with 15 years at the company? Especially when Kevin has friends at headquarters. The revelation hit Alex like a punch in the stomach. He had built an empire based on values of equality and respect, but behind the scenes, managers like Kevin were turning his dreams into nightmares of systematic discrimination. There's more, Jerome continued. Kevin found out I was collecting evidence. Yesterday he threatened me directly. He said if I caused trouble, he would make sure I never got a job in Atlanta again. Alex looked at the 23-year-old who was risking everything to do the right thing. Jerome had everything to lose and nothing to gain, but he still chose to fight injustice. Why are you doing this? Alex asked. Why risk so much? Jerome was silent for a long moment, staring at the city lights below. My mother cleaned offices for 30 years. She never complained, never protested, always stayed in her place. She died without ever being promoted, earning the same miserable salary. His hands clenched into fists. I promised at her funeral that when I had the chance to fight this injustice, I would fight. Even if I had to do it alone. At that moment, Alex saw in Jerome a younger version of himself. He too had grown up poor, he too had faced discrimination in his first jobs, he too had promised to do things differently when he had the power to do so. But somewhere on the way to the top, he had distanced himself from the reality of frontline employees. Kevin doesn't know you're his owner, right? Jerome asked. He has no idea, Alex confirmed. Then we have an advantage, Jerome smiled mischievously. He'll continue to treat me like trash and treat her like she's invisible. He won't even imagine that he's digging his own grave. At that moment, Alex realized that Jerome wasn't just a victim seeking help, he was a strategic ally waiting for the right opportunity to act. The young man had spent months gathering evidence, documenting everything, preparing for this moment. What's his plan? Alex asked, already knowing that Jerome had one. Tomorrow Kevin is going to make the riskiest change of all. $1,200 from a corporate party that he's going to try to blame on me. I already have everything ready to catch him red-handed, but I need someone I can trust as a witness. Alex looked at this brave and intelligent young man, thinking about how his own journey had begun in a similar way, a low-level employee noticing irregularities and deciding to take action. The difference was that now he had the power to ensure that justice was done. Jerome, Alex said with growing conviction, you're not going to face this alone. What Kevin couldn't imagine was that every act of cruelty, every display of prejudice was being carefully documented by 2 men he considered completely harmless. And when the trap was sprung, there would be no escape, because sometimes the best revenge is to give your enemy enough rope to hang himself. The next morning, Alex returned to Golden Burger dressed as an air conditioning technician, carrying a borrowed toolbox. Kevin didn't even look up when he entered. After all, maintenance workers were even more invisible than suspicious customers. Jerome had arrived an hour early to finalize preparations. Hidden in the employee bathroom, he installed a button-sized micro-camera in the corner of the room where the safe was located. Alex had provided the equipment through discreet contacts, One of the advantages of being the owner of a security company in addition to restaurants. "Today's the day," Jerome whispered to Alex as they pretended to have a casual conversation about problems with the cooling system. The Johnson and Associates corporate party was last night. $1,200 in extra payments that Kevin will try to make disappear from the system. Alex watched Kevin through the half-open office door. The manager was visibly nervous, constantly checking his cell phone, sweating more than usual. Clearly, he knew he was about to commit his biggest theft yet. "Are you sure he's going to try to pin it on her?" Alex asked. Jerome smiled bitterly. "Yesterday he already started. He told other employees that I had been acting strange lately, that I might be having financial problems. It's always the same tactic. Create the narrative before executing the scam." At 2 in the afternoon, Jerome's sister, Keisha Washington, arrived for what Kevin believed to be a routine audit by the corporate finance department. She had volunteered for this mission after finding out what was happening to his brother. Keisha was everything Jerome didn't yet have the opportunity to be: a Georgia Tech accounting graduate, working in the corporate sector for 5 years, respected by executives. But she had never forgotten where she came from, and family loyalty was stronger than any corporate protocol. "Mr. Herrera," Keisha greeted Kevin with impeccable professionalism. "I'm here to do the quarterly check of the records. I hope you have everything organized." Kevin forced a smile. Sure. All the documents are in the back room. Feel free to check them out." What Kevin didn't know was that Keisha had brought specialized equipment to detect digital alterations in point-of-sale systems. Each modification left electronic traces invisible to the naked eye, but glaring to those who knew where to look. Meanwhile, Alex continued her performance as a technician, discreetly installing monitoring devices at strategic angles. His plan was more sophisticated than Kevin could have imagined, not only to document the theft, but to create a complete record of the entire system of discrimination and corruption. "Jerome," Kevin called at 3:30. "I need you to count the money in the safe. There were some discrepancies last night." It was exactly what they expected. Jerome walked over to the safe, knowing he was now being filmed by multiple cameras. He counted the money methodically, announcing each amount aloud to the hidden microphones. $15,342, Jerome reported. Kevin wrote down the number, but Alex could see through the hidden camera that he was writing something different. $13,142. A discrepancy of exactly $2,200, much more than the $1,200 from the corporate party. "Kevin is being even more ambitious than we thought," Alex whispered to Jerome during a bathroom break. "He's not just stealing the party money. He's inventing a larger discrepancy to justify firing his theft." Jerome clenched his fists. "He wants to destroy me completely. Not just steal from me, but make sure I can never get a job anywhere again." "That will only make his fall more spectacular," Alex replied with a coldness that surprised even Jerome. "Keep following the plan. Your sister is recording everything." Keisha had discovered much more than just the recent alterations. The system showed a 3-year pattern of systematic modifications, always coinciding with black employees' shifts, always in amounts that made the discrepancies suspicious enough to justify dismissals. "Mr. Herrera," Keisha called Kevin over for a chat. "I found some irregularities that I need to clarify. Can you explain these changes in the sales records to me?" Kevin began to stammer. "What changes? I don't know what you're talking about. All records are automatic." "Interesting," Keisha replied, showing him the computer screen. "Because this shows that someone with her administrator password manually altered 17 transactions just last week." Kevin's face turned red. "It must be some kind of system error. Maybe an employee used his password without authorization." "Which employee would have access to his personal password?" Keisha asked innocently. Kevin looked directly at Jerome. "Well, some employees here aren't as trustworthy as they seem, especially those with financial difficulties." It was exactly the reaction they had hoped for. Kevin was digging his own grave, creating a racist narrative that would be devastating when exposed publicly. Alex watched everything through the monitors he had installed in the van parked outside. Every word, every gesture, every expression of contempt was being recorded in high definition. "Keisha," Kevin continued, gaining confidence when he realized he had an audience. "Between us, some of these employees, well, you understand. They come from certain communities where these things are more normal. Keisha kept her professional expression, but Alex could see her hands shaking with anger. What kind of things, Mr. Herrera? Petty theft, altering records, making up excuses. Kevin leaned forward conspiratorially. Especially that Jerome. I'm sure he's behind the discrepancies. He probably learned these techniques in, well, the environment he grew up in. Jerome, listening to everything through the hidden earpiece, needed all her willpower not to explode. But he knew that every racist word Kevin uttered was another brick in the wall of his own prison. Indeed, Keisha replied calmly, those are very serious accusations. It would be terrible if we discovered that an employee was stealing from the company. Kevin smiled, thinking he had convinced the auditor. Exactly. Especially when it comes to someone the company gave a chance to despite, well, you know how it is. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Kevin made his final move. He called Jerome into the office in front of other employees, with Keisha still present as a witness. Jerome, I need to inform you about a very serious situation, Kevin began with false solemnity. The audits have revealed significant discrepancies in the cash register, always during his shifts. Jerome feigned shock. What kind of discrepancies? $2,200 have gone missing this week alone, Kevin lied blatantly. And unfortunately, all the evidence points to him. Other employees gathered around, some genuinely shocked, others clearly knowing it was a lie but afraid to speak up. I would never steal anything, Jerome protested with the perfect indignation of someone who knew he was being recorded. The police will be called, Kevin announced dramatically. I can't allow a thief to continue working here. It was at that moment that Alex revealed himself. Turning off the air conditioning unit he was pretending to repair, he approached the group with an expression that made Kevin instinctively take a step back. Sorry to interrupt, Alex said with an authority that didn't match his work clothes. But I think there's a misunderstanding here. Kevin dismissed him impatiently. You're just the technician. This is not her business. Alex smiled. It was a cold smile that made the air in the restaurant seem colder. Actually, Kevin, this is exactly her business. How so? Kevin asked, irritated. Because, Alex replied, slowly taking out his wallet and showing her ID, I'm Alex Thompson, the owner of this company. And you just made the most expensive mistake of his life. Jerome feigned surprise perfectly, but his eyes sparkled with satisfaction. Keisha maintained her professional expression, but Alex could see the pride in her eyes. Kevin finally managed to stammer. The man you treated like trash yesterday, Alex finished. The suspicious customer that sent to sit at the bathroom table. The invisible technician that you ignored while plotting to destroy the life of an innocent employee. Kevin looked around desperately, as if searching for an exit that didn't exist. But there was no escape. Every racist word, every act of discrimination, every penny stolen had been documented with surgical precision. What Kevin couldn't imagine was that this revelation was only the beginning. Alex had spent 3 days creating not only enough evidence to destroy Kevin's career, but a plan so devastating that it would turn that moment of arrogance into a public nightmare that would haunt Kevin for the rest of his life. And Jerome, the young waiter Kevin had tried to humiliate and frame, was about to become the centerpiece of a revenge so perfect and poetic that it would redefine what true justice meant. The silence at Golden Burger was so absolute that Alex could hear his own heart beating. Kevin was paralyzed, his arrogance evaporating like water vapor under the midday sun. You can't be, Kevin stammered, but the words died in his throat when he saw Keisha approaching with a tablet in her hands. Kevin Herrera, she said with professional authority, on behalf of Thompson Industries, you are terminated for just cause. Theft, racial discrimination, and falsification of corporate documents. Alex watched Kevin literally crumble before his eyes. The man who minutes earlier had planned to destroy Jerome's life was now holding onto the wall to keep from falling. Keisha, show everyone what we found, Alex said calmly. On the tablet, the evidence appeared one by one, recordings of Kevin altering digital records, photos of her stealing money from the safe, and most devastating of all, audio recordings of his making racist comments about employees to prejudiced clients. This recording is from last night, Keisha announced, playing Kevin's unmistakable voice. These black employees are all the same. I give them jobs out of pity, but they always end up stealing. It's in his nature. The employees present were in shock. Some who had always suspected Kevin's practices finally saw their suspicions confirmed. Others, who had been silent accomplices, now realized the gravity of the situation. Kevin, Alex continued with a calmness that was more frightening than any scream, in 3 years, you stole $27,000 from this company. You fired 12 black employees based on false accusations. And you turned his restaurant into a toxic work environment. Kevin tried one last desperate gambit. You can't prove any of this. These are just manipulated recordings. Jerome finally spoke, her voice laden with a quiet satisfaction that had been building for months of humiliation. Kevin, you forgot something important. What are you talking about? Kevin growled. Jerome smiled for the first time since Alex had met him. The security cameras you installed yourself to monitor the employees? They record sound too. And I've had access to the digital files for weeks. The revelation hit Kevin like a bolt of lightning. Her own tools of oppression had become the weapons of her destruction. In addition, Alex added, our lawyers have already filed criminal charges against you. The police are on their way to escort you to the station. Kevin looked around desperately, searching for a friendly face, an ally, anything. But the employees who had previously fawned over him out of fear now looked at him with contempt and relief. Mr. Thompson, Kevin attempted one last pathetic plea, we can work this out another way. I'll return the money, resign quietly, and you don't have to make this public. Alex approached Kevin, her voice dangerously low. You thought you could destroy Jerome's life without consequences. That you could steal from me thinking I'd never find out. That you could turn my dream into a nightmare of racism. Now you're going to find out what it's like to be treated the way you treated my employees, Alex continued. Her photo and story will be sent to every restaurant in Atlanta. Her professional license will be revoked. And when you look for a job anywhere, everyone will know exactly who she is. Police sirens were approaching, getting louder by the second. Jerome approached Kevin one last time. Remember when he said I'd never get a job anywhere if I caused trouble? Jerome smiled. Well, now he's the one who won't get a job. When the police entered the restaurant to arrest Kevin for embezzlement, he was crying like a child. The man who had terrorized employees for years was now begging for mercy he had never shown others. Mr. Thompson, one of the employees approached timidly, we didn't know. I mean, some suspected, but... I know, Alex replied gently. Kevin created an environment where no one felt safe to speak up. That's going to change completely. As Kevin was led away in handcuffs, he shouted one last time, this can't be happening. I've worked here for 15 years. And for 15 years you abused the trust that was placed in him, Alex replied. Now he'll have the rest of his life to think about what he's done. Alex turned to Jerome, who was watching everything with an expression of deep relief. Jerome, I need to ask you an important question. Yes, sir. Will you accept his position as the new manager of this restaurant? The silence that followed was broken by spontaneous applause from all the employees present. Jerome was speechless for a moment, processing the magnitude of the change in his life. But there was still one final revelation that would completely transform the focus of this story. Alex was about to discover something about Jerome that would change not only the dynamics of the restaurant, but the course of his entire business empire. And what Kevin could never have imagined was that her downfall would be just the beginning of a transformation that would prove how true justice is not only about punishing the guilty, but elevating those who deserve to fly high. 6 months later, the Golden Burger on Peachtree Street was unrecognizable. Jerome had transformed the toxic environment into a place where employees smiled genuinely, customers of all classes were treated with equal respect, and productivity had increased by 40%. Mr. Washington, more resumes have arrived for the trainee manager positions, said Keisha, now Director of Human Resources for the southeastern region of Thompson Industries. Jerome smiled as he looked out the window of what used to be Kevin's office. His first act as manager had been to remove the desk from the corner by the restrooms and create a welcoming space where families from all walks of life felt at home. Alex appeared at the door, carrying 2 coffees. How is his new regional director settling in? Jerome's promotion had been announced the week before, from humiliated waiter to director of 23 restaurants in just 6 months. Still surreal, Jerome admitted. Sometimes I wake up thinking it's all a dream. And Kevin? Alex asked. Sued by 12 companies, bankrupt, and no restaurant in Atlanta will even accept his resume, Jerome replied without rancor. Sometimes he shows up here begging for a chance. Ironic, isn't it? Alex watched Jerome review employee satisfaction reports. The young man had implemented anti-discrimination training programs, raised salaries, and created an environment where talent mattered more than her appearance. You know what the best revenge was? Jerome asked, closing the reports. What? It wasn't seeing Kevin get arrested. It was proving that when you treat people with dignity, they fly higher than any prejudiced person could ever imagine. Kevin tried to destroy Jerome, but ended up destroying only himself. Jerome learned that true justice is not retaliating for the evil suffered, it is building a success that his enemies could never achieve. If this story of overcoming adversity and justice has inspired you, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment. What was her greatest victory against prejudice?